I love to start them on time. Well, good morning, good morning, good morning. We're glad that each and every one of you have arrived, and we expect a good presentation this morning, uh, and we certainly looking forward to this presentation. And then we'll move right into the final recommendations. And that will not take too long because you'll have an opportunity to deal with those as we go along. I'm going to call on the co-chair here, Mac Jackson, to offer a word of prayer to us.
Thank you, Chairman. Am I on?
You've always been on.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everybody. It's a beautiful day today. Let's go before the Lord in prayer. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this day, for truly this is the day that you have made, and we will rejoice and we will be glad in it. We ask for your guidance, your wisdom, as we do the business of this great state of Georgia. Father, we just thank you for this season that we're in, Lord, and we give you thanks for everything. In Jesus' name, amen.
Well, thank you there, Chairman Jackson. We have individuals that have traveled a long way to hear this presentation today, and I didn't think they were going to make it, but they are always faithful members of this group, and we're delighted to have you come today. Let's go ahead and get started. Jared, if you want to get your group together and head on up to the table there. And if we need to get another mic up there, we can do that. We've got two, haven't we? Oh, and it's one at the podium. So,
Good morning.
good morning.
I'm Anna Chafin. I'm President and CEO of RISE. That stands for Regional Industry Support Enterprise, and we're a relatively new regional workforce development and industry support organization serving the Savannah region. And so welcome to Statesboro, which is part of our service delivery territory. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the RISE region a little later in the presentation, but I want to say thank you, Chairman Green, Chairman Jackson, for the opportunity to be here today to share with you. I want to thank our legislators for your continued support of economic development in the state of Georgia, as well as your support of workforce development in the state of Georgia. We're very proud that Georgia continues to be the #1 state to do business for 11 years in a row. And prior to being in RISE, I was in local economic development for almost 20 years. I worked at the Liberty County Development Authority for 8, and then most recently I was at the Development Authority of Bryan County for 10 years. And through my involvement with the Development Authority of Bryan County, I had the opportunity to work with the Savannah Harbor Interstate 16 Corridor Joint Development Authority. We're just going to call that the JDA from here on out. That's made up of 4 counties: Bryan, Bullock, Chatham, and Effingham. And some of y'all may know that the JDA was the entity that partnered with the Georgia Department of Economic Development and Governor Kemp and his team to recruit Hyundai to our region. And so back in mid-2022, shortly after the announcement that Hyundai would be locating in our region, the one thing that was keeping my colleagues and I up at night the most was making sure that we had the workforce to support not just Hyundai and the suppliers, but all of our existing industries that had already invested in our region, which include our manufacturers, our distribution companies, our assembly firms. We wanted to make sure that everybody had access to the talent that they needed. So we felt like the right thing to do was to put together a small group and talk about next steps when it came to workforce development from a regional standpoint. So we're very thankful to Audrey King with Georgia Power and her leadership. She assembled a small group that included herself. I was part of that group, as well as the CEOs of the development authorities in Chatham, Effingham, and Bullock counties, because Bryan, Bullock, Chatham, and Effingham make up that JDA. And then we are also joined by Jay Neely with Gulfstream, one of our region's largest employers, and also Stacy Watson with the Georgia Ports Authority. So we came together And we quickly realized the most responsible thing that we could do, the best thing that we could do to support regional workforce development going forward, was to hire a consultant to do a study. So I'm going to talk briefly about the study results. This study was completed last year in 2023, and we hired Wadley, Donovan, and Gutshaw Consulting. They're a site selection firm based out of New Jersey. They have an office in Jacksonville, which handled our assignment. And the reason we chose this firm is that they have experience with our market. They had worked with Justin Farquhar, who's my colleague at RISE, when we were both at the Development Authority of Bryan County. They helped us with a couple of workforce assessments. They previously worked for the Georgia Ports Authority with a workforce assessment, and even 20 plus years ago, they worked with the Liberty County Development Authority related to the Target Regional Distribution Center there in a workforce assessment. So we knew they had familiarity with our market, and we felt like they were the right choice to help us with the study. So you can see the two things that we asked them to identify. One, labor supply challenges facing existing employers, and two, initiatives that will minimize the exposure to existing and future labor supply shortfalls. And the geography that they studied included a 1-hour commute of the Bryan County megasite. And so this is now the location of where the Hyundai Meta plant is. So on site at the Hyundai facility, there will ultimately be 8,500 jobs. And then when you figure in all the suppliers that have announced within the state of Georgia, that takes the head count for the Meta plant and the suppliers to over 15,000 jobs, and that's just Hyundai-related jobs. And then, like I said earlier, we've got other existing industries that are expanding, new companies locating in the region. So that was kind of the full scope of what we were considering. But the central point up there is the star, that's the Meta plant, and everything inside the red boundary is the 1-hour commute from that point. And you can see that picks up a pretty large geography. It's bigger than that 4-county Bryan, Bullock, Chatham, and Effingham that make up the JDA that are identified in black. So we've got about a dozen plus counties that are impacted within that labor draw area. And the consultant decided to study a 1-hour commute because they believed, and we agreed, for a good manufacturing job, people will travel up to about an hour. So the scope of the study included 3 tasks. One was market analysis. This was desktop demographic information that considered the current conditions at the time last year, as well as 5-year projections. We also had the consultant identify immediate needs and challenges. This information was gleaned from a couple of different ways. One was through a 93-question electronic survey that was conducted with our existing industries in the region. We wanted their input. We also did some deeper dives through the consultant with some of our existing industry executives to learn even more. And then finally, we had stakeholder meetings with a variety of partners from throughout the region, which included K-12, higher ed, county and municipal leaders, economic development officials, and even staffing agencies. And then really the key deliverable that we got as part of this workforce study was the strategic workforce plan. So it's a very robust study. I would be glad to share with y'all the executive summary. If you give me your email address, I can follow up after this meeting. But for the purposes of today's conversation, I'm just going to focus on the 5 key takeaways. And we believe that this study and the plan that we've got is really going to help us move our region forward related to workforce development. So the first takeaway is probably not going to be a surprise to anybody in the room. Overall, labor supply is extremely tight in our region. But you know, this isn't just unique to our region. We also have a tight labor market throughout the state of Georgia and even across the United States. Now, where we're going to differentiate ourselves, I think, as a region is the consultant predicts that in the 4-county area alone, Bryan, Bullock, Chatham, and Effingham, we will probably grow 25,000 people approximately over a 5-year period. So that will help mitigate some of this tightness that we have in our labor market. Our next takeaway is future demands will vary annually, but top needs will continue to be technical and production roles. And you can see up here on the screen, this is what we call our top 10 list of most in-demand jobs. So we've got over 16,000 positions that we have to fill through 2027. That's not very long from now. And so we've got our work cut out for us. And you can see that these are really technical and production roles. And this ties in well with our next takeaway, which is workforce development initiatives must work to draw more high school graduates into industries, including manufacturing. So when I graduated from high school at Glenn Academy down in Brunswick back in 1996, I had one choice. My parents said, Anna, you're going to college. So I went to college. I'm a proud Mercer University graduate. And my son, he's in 7th grade. He's a 12-year-old. And if I can get him through high school, I want him to know he has choices. He can go to a 4-year college or university. He can go to a technical college. He can go into the military, or he can go right to work. And what I want him to understand is if he decides to go right to work, I will support that. And that doesn't mean that he's giving up post-secondary forever. His employer may one day decide to help him continue his education, and that means that he and my husband and I don't have to incur debt. So I think we've just really got to broaden the conversation. I never want to discourage a student from pursuing post-secondary because it is still right for so many of our students, and we need so many of our students to go to college. But we also have an immediate need right here in our region where we have a lot of jobs that we need to fill. And these aren't just jobs that you go into and you make $12 an hour forever. These are needle-moving, life-changing jobs that have career pathways. And so I really think that we need to broaden the conversation about helping students, teachers, and parents know there are a lot of great options out there for our students. So our next takeaway was probably the biggest surprise for me, and I know that Jared's going to elaborate specifically on military in just a few minutes. So the consultant told us available labor supply from our military departures is underutilized. And so we're blessed in this region. We have both Fort Stewart and Hunter Army Airfield. This is producing thousands of what I call heroes for hire annually. These are people that are separating from Fort Stewart and Hunter. They're cross-trained, they're computer literate, they have a great work ethic, and they would make tremendous employees once they separate. And so the consultant has advised us that we need to be more intentional on trying to find ways to keep that talent right here in our region and in our state. And so it's not just about those service members that are separating. We also have several thousand spouses that are actively seeking employment. And if you think about it, the spouse has oftentimes followed their service member across the country, sometimes across the world. The family gets to the last duty station, and it's the spouse's turn to consider a career. And if they find employment, that allows the family to put down some roots and to stay, hopefully, once the service member separates. So I think we need to be not just focused on the service members, but also the spouses, the dependents, and also our veterans. And then our final takeaway is the Savannah region has a number of workforce strengths and several challenges. On the strength side, these are obvious things, like the Port of Savannah continues to be one of the major drivers for a lot of our growth that's occurring in our industrial sector, not just in our region, but in our state. And also, we believe that we have a quality of life advantage here in our region, specifically our weather. We know it's a little cold here right now, but up in the Midwest and the Northeast, it's probably a lot colder, more snow and things like that. We're able to recreate pretty much all year round here, so we believe that from a quality of life and a weather standpoint, we're an attractive place to live, work, and play, and we can encourage people to move to our state. Now, on the challenges side, the consultant identified several, and I'm just going to touch on a few. One of the challenges that was identified was housing. We believe we have some gaps in our housing inventory in our region. We know we have gaps in our housing inventory across the state. And the good news is help is on the way. So Georgia Tech is currently in the process of putting together a study for the four-county region of Bryan, Bullock, Chatham, and Effingham, and ultimately that will be expanded to some of the other counties in our region to provide data to our local governments to help them understand what the best path forward is related to housing. So while there's a challenge there, we also have an opportunity with the data that the local governments can get to hopefully make informed decisions about housing going forward. Another challenge that was identified was transportation. We have a lack of regional transportation in this area, and we know that that's keeping some people on the sidelines, that they don't have access to reliable transportation. So that's something the consultant advised we should look at. And then finally, childcare. This has become a very hot topic over the past year. I don't think it's localized just to this region or this state. I think this is a conversation that's occurring across the country. And so what we're finding is we have a twofold issue in our region. One is we have portions of our region that are what we call child care deserts. These are areas where we just don't have facilities. And then in other places where we have facilities, we may not be operating at full capacity because the facilities don't have the personnel to fully staff up. And so we are working with Georgia Southern University. We just found out this week that Norfolk Southern is going to be funding a grant for Georgia Southern to conduct a child care needs assessment for RISE. So really excited about that to help us better understand not just what the challenges are there, but also what the opportunities are related to child care. So before I leave this slide, to me, the data you see up on the right-hand side, my right-hand side of the screen, is probably the most impactful data that I saw in the study. And so what this does is it shows the projections for our technical and production roles from 2023 through 2031. And if you'll call your attention to the one-time supply of the underemployed column. So what the prediction is there is by next year, 2025, it's expected that we're going to have close to negative 1,500 people to fill the technical and production roles that we have. So we're going to have more jobs than we have people to fill those jobs from 2025 through 2031. So when we got this information back last year, we were alarmed, and we quickly realized we needed to act. And so we released this information to the public last November, and in December it was announced that SEDA, the Savannah Economic Development Authority, would fund us in year one. And so our team of 4, we started to work on January the 2nd. So this is our service delivery area for RISE. It includes those 4 JDA counties, Bryan, Bullock, Chatham, and Effingham. We've also picked up 4 other counties. A couple of those are rural counties, to include Evans, Candler, Screven, and Liberty. I do want to give a shout out to Representative Al Williams. I know he's not able to be here today, but he's part of your committee. He is actually the vice chair of our RISE board. So we're very thankful to have his expertise on the RISE board. We recently had our first board meeting with our 501c6 board. So the development authorities in these 8 counties, starting next year, will be funding RISE. And in return for their contribution, they have board seats on the RISE board. And after we get the 501c6 set up, hopefully early next year, we'll turn our attention to standing up a 501c3, which will be a foundation to help support things like educational initiatives, and that will allow the private sector to invest in RISE. So this is a quick overview of what the workforce development plan was provided by the consultant. As I mentioned earlier, we're not unique in the fact that we've got a tight labor market here. But where we are going to differentiate ourselves is we are going to be proactive. And we're actively working in several different focus areas, not just one. We're diversifying our approach, and I'm going to talk about that in just a few minutes. But really what we're here to do is to be a connector and a facilitator. We're not trying to replace or compete with any of our existing entities, not our local development authorities, not our workforce resources. We're here to be their partner, and we're here to be the facilitator to bring everybody together, because what the study noted is that we were lacking a quarterback for workforce development in our region, and that's what RISE's role will be. So we are going to operate through a couple of different ways. One is we are going to either enhance or stand up employer forums throughout the region in partnership with our local development authority. So for instance, here in Bullock County, they've had an established industry group for decades, and it includes Bullock, Candler, Evans, and Screven counties. And so RISE is coming in quarterly. This group usually meets monthly, but we're coming in quarterly and providing programming to help support them. A couple of months ago, we offered a retention panel that was moderated by one of the members of our team. And separately, we're standing up these employer forums throughout the region. We're currently partnering with the Savannah Chamber and their industry council, and hopefully plan to deliver some programming early in the new year. And then really, a lot of our time and attention is being spent in these working groups. And over the past almost year, we've been laser focused on these 7 areas. So military, for obvious reasons. I talked earlier about how this is very much an underutilized resource, and Jared's going to elaborate more on that. Underrepresented, this includes everybody from second chance hires to minority groups, people with different abilities, senior citizens, opportunity youth. Also an underutilized sector of our talent, and we need to put more time and attention here. Housing, I talked earlier about this was a challenge that was identified by the study, but we are actively working to get the data in order to make some informed decisions going forward. Education. This is really where our group has spent most of our time thus far, and I believe we will continue to engage not just our K-12, but our higher education community. And one thing that we did recently is we took a group of about 30 leaders from our region to Bowling Green, Kentucky. And a large portion of the group was made up of education professionals from K-12 and higher ed. All eight of our school systems were represented. We had the presidents of Georgia Southern, Ogeechee Technical College, Savannah Technical College, and the interim president at Savannah State that participated in the visit. So really a large focus on education where we traveled to Bowling Green. And you may say, why'd y'all go to Bowling Green, Kentucky? Well, the reason we went to Bowling Green was because the study told us we should. It was identified as a best practice community of a place where they're really doing things right when it comes to K-12 and higher ed engagement with the business and industry community. So we took a smaller group up to Bowling Green last fall. Bert was part of that group and traveled with us, and we all learned so much. We took a bigger group back. But again, a large focus on that trip was on education, because that, to me, is our best talent pipeline, are the students that are coming through our public schools and our technical colleges and universities. We want to keep that talent right here in this region. Transportation, I mentioned earlier, this is a barrier right now for some people to pursue meaningful employment, and so we have an active working group that is focused on how do we provide regional transportation options. Child care was not one of our original working groups, but one of the first acts of business that our board took up at our recent board meeting is they made child care an official working group, which I think is a step in the right direction. And then finally, marketing. And this is marketing to our homegrown talent, those students and those job seekers that are already here in our region. But the study tells us we're still going to need help from outside. And so we will be actively working with a talent attraction brand on trying to encourage people to move to our region. We're going to go outside of the state. We don't want to compete with labor in other parts of the state of Georgia. We're going to go find people from outside the state, hopefully, to help move here and help support these requirements we have for all these different career opportunities. So I know I covered a lot of ground in a short period of time, but I just wanted to set the stage for y'all to understand what we have going on in our region. I think it's not dissimilar than what we're seeing in other parts of the state where we have tight labor markets. But the good news is that here in this 8-county region, we are laser focused on workforce development. And while we're serving 8 counties right now, we one day could be as large as 20 counties we see, but we want to scale in the appropriate way. And again, just want to thank you all for your service and your support.
Thank you, Anna. And as she said, I'm Jared Downs, I'm Vice President, Savannah Area Chamber of Commerce. I cover governmental affairs and military affairs. And meeting with Anna earlier this year, we were talking about, as she discussed, one of their pillars is military. And the retirees coming out of, for us, it's Fort Stewart, Hunter Army Airfield. And as we can tell right now, I think we're capturing only 40% of those retirees. And in discussions I've had with numerous, active duty soldiers, and I remember one, it was a colonel and his wife were having lunch, and he was about to retire, and I kind of jokingly said, well, Greg, I've got a great realtor I can put you in touch with. And she said, we're not staying here. And I said, well, why? She said, well, y'all tax military retirement. And so y'all worked on that, and you pulled it down to, in essence, the first $35,000 of military retirement is not taxed. And I thought, well, we solved that problem. Well, back to about 3 months ago, I was talking to a sergeant major, exact conversation. Said, I got a realtor for you. He said, well, we're not staying here. We're going to go to South Carolina because they don't tax our military retirement. And I said, yeah, but we've brought it down. And he said, yes, but you're still taxing it. So it's still a barrier. And, and Bert Brantley's here as well to help talk to us about this. And, as Anna said, we've got a tight labor market. And this might be, by removing the tax entirely on military retirement, might be a way for us to attract more of those soldiers to stay in the state of Georgia. I know we have the issue They have it down in St. Mary's. They've got it in Columbus and Augusta. And so we're working with those chambers as well to help address the issue. So,
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So I'm Burt Brantley with the Savannah Area Chamber of Commerce. I think this is the third time that I've testified in front of this committee in 3 different jobs. So hopefully this is the last one that you'll hear from me on. But we, of course, when I was in Governor Kemp's office, we worked with the House and Senate and negotiated a income tax reduction for everyone. And that, for our chamber members, is really impactful, particularly with costs rising these days. So for our workers and for our businesses to see that overall income tax rate lowering. I know you guys have even gone, I think, a little more aggressive on the timeline since a couple years ago when we first approved that. And so we're very supportive of that, very thankful for the work that's been done by the General Assembly. And but this specific issue of military retirement, with us being so close to South Carolina, Jared mentioned when we went up with our exemption, the next legislative session, South Carolina came back into a full elimination of military retirement. So it's a competitive marketplace that we're in. Of course, Tennessee and Florida doesn't have any income tax at all, and they tax other things that we don't. And so we're in a competitive marketplace. We're trying to keep our military retirees here, particularly those that are in working age. Obviously, when they hit retirement age, retirement income is not taxed. We're really talking about those mid 40s to early 60s soldiers that are retiring after 20 years of service. They're coming out into the workforce, and they've got a choice. They can stay here. I think Anna said very well, it's not just them, it's their spouses, and then in many cases their teenage and older dependents as well. So it's not just a one, it's a 2 or maybe 3 or 4 worker decision that's being made when a retiree decides where they're going to go and where they're going to work. And so we would love to see a continued not only the overall tax rate, which we're very pleased with and excited about, but some additional either raise on that exemption or potentially a total elimination. We know that's expensive. We know there's a lot of competing priorities, and so we don't come here not acknowledging that, realizing it. But we are just wanted to raise the issue. Anna, walked through very well the very strategic way that our region is addressing our workforce challenges. And I can, as a chamber member, as one of those counties, we're so thrilled with the work that's being done with our RISE colleagues and addressing sort of all of these things individually, one by one, with workforce groups or task force groups. And this is one of those issues that we're seeing. We're also going to work with the TAP programs on bases, make sure they know about the opportunities that are in our region when they separate. So there's additional things we can do working with our employers to make sure they know there's a workforce that's coming out as well. So it's not only the tax rates. We know there's a lot of different decisions that are being made. Some of these heroes are just going back home. They got stationed down here, they're from another part of the country, they're moving back home, or they have family support, and so we're not going to get 100% of the folks that are separating to stay here. But that 40% number, if we can get it to 45 or 50 or 55%, that's going to make a real difference for our employers and our region as well, as we keep these, as Anna mentioned, great work ethic, great community service. These are folks that we want to retain in our region. And we looked at a survey yesterday that we did of our employers. 11 to 12% of our workers are military veterans. And so again, if we can just make a 1 or 2 or 3% of that difference, that'll make a big difference in our employers' ability to find a qualified and skilled workforce. So we appreciate your interest in this, and glad to answer any questions that you have or about all the work that RISE is doing, or specifically. I think Jared mentioned well, if you look at our bases around the state, a lot of them are near our borders, and we know that that's one of the reasons why they're located that way, so that when these discussions come around, you get not only the state they're in, but also the neighboring state that'll be interested. So it's not just us. We know there are our colleagues around the state that are interested in this issue as well. So really appreciate your interest.
And then this is the map just on a website that most military members go to right before they're going to retire, and it shows exactly who does and doesn't tax their retirement. So it kind of gives them a roadmap of their next location. So, and Georgia kind of sticks out a little bit in the southeast. So.
We have all that information for the members to look at, and that is the map up there that you're showing us is quite a, as we used yesterday, over and over, an eye-opener in this respect. When did South Carolina do the raising?
Yeah. Yes, sir. It was the next session after.
After what we did?
Yes, sir.
And we thought we were doing the right, and of course we did the right thing. Do we have any questions from the committee? Okay. Go ahead. Is it on?
I can be very loud if I'm
Touch the button there.
See if Steve is on.
There you go.
Well, we want them on because it's going out.
Keep talking. Okay. That's on. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank y'all for being here, for bringing this information. That map is shocking, very eye-opening. I'm glad you brought it. I'm just curious, as you're having conversations with those who are separating from the military, do you have any data or just any inkling of what the average age of those that are separating from Hunter and just those that are in the area we're talking about here? What's their typical age? I guess I'm wondering how many more years of working are we looking at from them? I think that'd be valuable information to have so we know exactly what we're trying to grab when we're doing this.
So most of the enlisted that are retiring are doing it after 20 years, so it's in your mid-40s, early to mid-40s.
Okay, yeah.
So if you enlist
as a
at 18
non-military
or-
family, I did not.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for
If you
for
enlist
that.
at 18 or 19 and work 20 years, you're going to be in that late 30s,
Gotcha.
early 40s. And so in terms of working life, such a great question, right? In terms of working life, you're talking about 10, 15
years.
where they're going to go and work and collect that retirement check. And so when you're, a lot of these guys and gals are free agents, right? I mean, they may not have any specific connection to our region. They were stationed down here because of what job they have and what duty they have that they're serving our country. And so they've got the total choice. They can go anywhere, and it's incredibly competitive. Everybody's coming after these folks because they have such great work ethic. They're reliable. They show up on time. They're skilled. And so it's a very competitive market. And so, yeah, I mean, we're talking 10, 15, maybe even 20 years of work career beyond their military service in many cases.
And plus their spouses. I mean, they too, I'm sure, are very disciplined, and I mean, they're military families, so
right.
they're also people that we want to grab and keep.
Yeah. And in a lot of cases, those are 2-year stints that they serve in a location. And so we have found that the military spouses sometimes have a hard time finding a job because the employers know they're going to be leaving. So you spend all this money to train and get them, up to speed, and then they're going to leave. And so there's a little bit of a stigma around military spouses. So the more we can do to show a roadmap, a path for them to stay, the more competitive they're going to be out in the workforce as well. And
Right.
so, and then again, some of them have teenagers, and those are the folks that are working out in some of our retail and fast food and those kind of jobs where we also have shortage as well. So it's not just that soldier,
Right.
it's their spouse and their dependents as well. And if they plant roots here, then you may see end up a lifelong resident that is very committed and part of our community.
And that's such a good point, because we know we've talked in this council and in other committees we serve on, where a person's educated is where they're most likely to stay. So grabbing their children too and just keeping them here as long as we can keep them here is a good thing. So, well, thank you for everything you're doing to try to grab them and keep them here, and thank you for bringing this information to us.
That was a good question, yeah. Do we have anyone else that wishes to speak, ask questions? There, I was waiting for you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I noticed you looking at me longingly to, this will be my
Well, you
last.
always have good questions.
This will not be
This
one of
is his
those.
swan's
Yeah,
song.
this will not be one of those. It is indeed. Thank you for the presentation. Chairman Jaspers and I were running some numbers. It appears, well, might as well. What can you do to me now? So most of the enlisted men and women that will retire at 40 to 45, we're not taxing them on state tax anyway, because their retirement income is going to be less than $35,000.
That's right.
So if you're a colonel, yeah, you're going to get a pretty good bump. It's kind of like Chairman Green with, 65 years in the school system and his things that he has. So I'm just wondering if the other alternatives. So this is Plan A of how can we address this. But we're already have 40% penetration, which I think is pretty good with retirees in our area. And we'd love to, because we need more people, good workers, and this is a good workforce. If there is other things that makes this area more attractive, certainly a stronger job market than they're going to find most any other place in the entire country, for their kids, for their spouse, will certainly be a check mark for this particular area. But what are the other things that outside of state tax? Just down south of us, Florida does not tax any state income, and no state income tax. And instead of getting in a bidding war, because a lot of those that are getting out of the military at these bases around us, we have already addressed the issue of not taxing military pay unless you are, a pretty high-ranking individual.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I would, you're exactly right. Totally agree with everything you said. Those are the folks that we'd love to keep too, though. I mean, those are those higher level officers can do higher level work as well, and so we'd love to be able to keep the folks who not just be a production worker, but also the line manager, those with leadership skills who can take some of the. I mean, Hyundai is going to have certainly the production line, but they're also going to have a lot of folks that are doing HR and doing other leadership things as well. And so we'd love to be able to keep folks across that spectrum. But yeah, this is not our only strategy coming and talking to you guys about this. We have heard repeatedly that a lot of reasons that the people that folks leave our regions, they don't know about the opportunities that are here. They get so focused on their work. They're defending our country. They're not paying close attention to what's happening at factories outside the fence. They're sometimes deployed and overseas, and so we are doing a better job, and we'll continue to do a much better job of working with the Transition Assistance and Placement Office to make sure they know about the activities the workforce opportunities that are in the region. We also have to get over there and show them about the quality of life opportunities that are in our region. We think that's a real differentiator for us, and we've got to show how much we love and appreciate and care about Fort Stewart and Fort Hunter, and not just those, but we also have bases up in Beaufort and of course down in Kings Bay, so all throughout the region as well. And so there's a number of decision points that they're thinking about when they're coming out, where their family lives, where they want to live from a quality of life perspective, and so that this tax piece is one of them, but it's not the only one. And so we're that military task force that Anna showed earlier is not just sitting and waiting, hoping with fingers crossed that this is addressed. We've got the whole program, mostly with that TAP office, to make sure that we're out there talking to them. Our employers know that it's both ways. This is a great pool of workforce for them to tap into, And then for the soldiers, this is a great opportunity that's outside the fence and waiting on them if they want to stay here.
One follow-up, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
You certainly can.
So in piggybacking on that with what was mentioned in the previous presentation surrounding housing, and forgive me, this is something I probably should know and I don't, how many of the personnel that are retiring already have their a permanent housing that they own versus on-base stuff, and so is that an additional barrier for those that are retiring? Well, now I have to find not just a job and a place to call a forever place, but also have to find a house in a tough market.
Generally speaking, of course, there's always individual cases, but generally speaking, if you have been in 20 years and you're retiring, you have made it to a level where you can afford to live off base and be part of the community. So I would say, I do not have a number, but I would say that most of those folks have permanent off-base housing. But the job market or the housing market is so tight here, they can sell that house, for probably a good, profit and go move, somewhere else. And so, we also need to work on better housing options on base, which is something that Jared, through his time with Senator Isaacson and then his time here at the Chamber, that we are really interested in. We've got to, and that's not, of course, that's not us and it's not you guys. That's a federal government issue, but we really owe these heroes and their families a better on-base living experience, and so we're advocating in Washington for that continually. But part of the reason they don't want to live on base is because the housing conditions on base are not great in a lot of cases. So I don't know that them being able to find housing. We've got to work on housing overall for everybody, not just them. But I think for the most part, those folks have found permanent housing and are living outside the fence, and so it's just really a matter of, do they cash in and sell their house and move somewhere else, or do they stay and find a place to work?
So as an economist, as a free market guy, I recognize that if there is a potential for an entrepreneur to make a buck, they generally do. And is there that you're aware of in this particular geographic center that we've talked about today, are there additional barriers to entry to have the market finding a way of, if it is a tight market, housing market, and I am a construction guy, and I know that I can make, because I've got 10 people that want houses, and I know I could sell the houses, what are the barriers to entry to have the market help us solve a problem we have?
Well, a whole other conversation I know you guys are working on separately from this, but housing policy, we have got to have improvements in our what the requirements that make housing more expensive that come from usually local governments, but I think there's some state things as well. I know you guys are working that. Representative Washburn has been leading on that, and so I think yes, absolutely, there are absolutely things that we have got to do from a local standpoint, state standpoint, and I think this is, again, Anna mentioned this, across the country. They're dealing with these things, right? And so we're very supportive of that. The housing task force that Anna mentioned, we've got a housing summit coming up next week, where we're talking to local governments about their housing policy. I would tell you, from a Chatham and City of Savannah perspective, they acknowledge they've got some policies that are, City of Savannah says their number one priority is affordable housing, but they passed impact fees last year, which we know increased the cost of housing, right? And so we've got some disconnect between what your goal is and then what your policy is, and so we've all got to work on that together to make sure that we're matching up our priorities with our policy as well. So we would be very supportive of anything that the state would do to help reduce some of those cost barriers on housing around the state, and certainly in our region as well.
And I want to go back to your previous question. I know at Hunter Army Airfield, 70% of the I'm sorry, at Hunter Army Airfield, 70% of the soldiers live off base. So,
Ron Stevens regrets that he cannot be here this morning.
We've
just-
kept him busy this week. He's
yeah,
had a busy week.
you must have made him sick. He's under the weather this morning, but he sends his regrets that he could not be here. Do we have any other questions from the committee? Great presentation, Anna. You really outlined a lot of those. It's interesting about the map as we've noted there. And what does Bowling Green, Kentucky, doing that you would go there and Georgia is yellow and Kentucky is yellow?
So one of the differentiators that I found, and I'll let Bert chime in because he also participated in a visit, is within their K-12 system. So they have a city and a county school system in Bowling Green and Warren County, but both of the systems over the past 10 plus years have adopted what's called the leader in me mindset. It's based on the Covey 7 habits, and it's a leadership development mindset that's fully integrated from kindergarten through 12th grade. And so when we visited last year and then this year, I was just blown away. We went into an elementary school last year, and we had student ambassadors that were in their blazers and were very articulate and well-spoken, and they guided us through the school, and they answered questions very articulately. And then at the end of the tour, I asked the principal, I was just curious about the socioeconomic dynamics of this school. And I asked the principal, I said, what percentage of your students are free and reduced lunch? And he told me 72%. And I was like, okay. And we separately visited a high school, and also very impressed by what we saw there from the students and heard about their programs. And I asked at the end of that tour, what is your graduation rate? And it was 98.8%.
Wow.
And so you have to believe there's a direct correlation between that leadership development mindset that's fully integrated from K through 12, that's helping translate into a high graduation rate and producing quality students that can go to work or can pursue post-secondary and then go to work. And so they figured some things out in Bowling Green. Bert, anything you want to elaborate on?
The thing I would add is, and of course, when you go and visit a region, you get their best version of themselves, right? They present, but no matter where we went, we had they have a city school system and a county school system there. They have a mayor and a chairman. They have chambers, and no matter where we went, there was total alignment on the goals. There was no disconnect. I mean, the city school system and the county system use the same this Leader in Me program, and it can, whatever the program is, you can argue which ones. We saw the effects of that one. That's pretty good, but there was no disagreement. There was no gap between what was happening at the city and the county school system. There's no gap between the mayor of Bowling Green and the what we would call the chairman of the county. In their regional entity up there. It was total alignment around, they had a real issue. They've got a plant that's 40 minutes away, a major automotive plant, and they knew they had, to act. And they're a few years ahead of us. They've done a lot of the same things that we are doing. But I would tell you that if you got those same folks from our region together, they'd have differences. They would do different things different ways. In a lot of cases, we like for schools to try different things and be laboratories, but that was the big takeaway from me, was everybody was totally aligned and supportive of each other, and all knew the goal and knew the assignment, and we're all working towards that together. There was no division, there was no disagreement. They were all totally aligned. And I think from a chamber perspective and our regional chambers, that's something that we can ask our school boards and our elected officials and all those folks to come together and work together in alignment on addressing these challenges.
Well, that's the good answer for us. Not only we'll be watching what happens in your area, but there are those of us who have military bases in other areas that y'all need to align with to carry forth, because whatever happens in your area certainly would
sir.
be a demonstration of what is needed in the others.
Yeah, and Chairman, if I could quickly add to that, we've got a hub council group of those chambers.
good.
And you'll hear, I think, from most, if not all of them, because it's, again, not just Savannah, it's Valdosta and Kingsland and Columbus and
Yeah.
all over Augusta, all over the state, in a similar situation with the.
Well, you have a lot of local talent that could be utilized in these areas, and that is something that all the regions of the state need.
Yes, sir.
Thank y'all so much for the opportunity to present this to us, and thank you for taking the time to come here. Y'all did an excellent job. Do we have any other questions or anything? If not,
Good.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are down to the part now where we're going to be looking at some. Okay, right now we're going to adjourn the House Rural Development Council. That